My name is Ethan Cole. At least, that's what you can call me. For over 2 decades, I worked cases that don't exist in any database you'll ever access. Operations buried so deep that even the FBI's own internal systems have no record of them. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about one case in particular, a case that officially never happened. It was the winter of 2018. I'd been with the Bureau for 15 years, mostly working organized crime and financial fraud, standard stuff, or so I thought. But sometimes you get a call that changes everything. It started with a phone call at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I was staring at my alarm clock, wondering who the hell was calling at that hour. "Agent Cole, this is Deputy Director Harrison. I need you in my office now." In 20 years with the Bureau, I'd never spoken directly to a deputy director. These people live in a different world, so when one of them calls you at 3 a.m., you know it's not going to be routine. I threw on whatever clothes I could find and drove through empty DC streets to the Hoover building. At that hour, the place looked like a fortress, dark windows, a few security guards, and an eerie silence that seemed to swallow sound. Harrison was waiting for me on the 7th floor in an expensive suit even at 3 a.m. But what caught my attention wasn't his clothes, it was his eyes. I'd seen a lot of scared people in my career, but I'd never seen fear in a deputy director's eyes before that night. "Cole," he said, "what I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room. In fact, after tonight, this conversation never happened." He handed me a manila folder with no classification markings, no case number. Inside were photographs, crime scene photos, unlike anything I'd ever seen. The location was a warehouse in Baltimore. From the outside, it looked abandoned, broken windows, rust stains, the kind of place drug dealers use for meats. But inside, someone had turned it into a sophisticated laboratory. Not a meth lab or some backyard chemistry set. This was professional equipment that probably cost more than my house. In the center of it all were 3 bodies, but they hadn't just been killed. They'd been changed, modified, like someone was using them for experiments. Harrison told me the warehouse had been discovered by Baltimore PD during a routine patrol. But within 2 hours, federal agents had cordoned off the block. Within 4 hours, the case was transferred to a division I'd never heard of, and within 6 hours, the warehouse fire was officially ruled an electrical accident, except there was no fire. "Your job," Harrison said, "is to make this disappear, quietly, permanently." In 15 years with the Bureau, I'd never been asked to cover something up. We investigate, we prosecute, we don't bury evidence, but this felt different. I spent 3 days reviewing everything, police reports, witness statements, forensic evidence, and piece by piece, I began to understand why they wanted it gone. The warehouse held cutting-edge biotechnology, not commercially available yet. The modifications to the bodies weren't random violence. Someone was enhancing human capabilities, strength, speed, pain tolerance. And they were getting results. The 3 victims weren't random street people. Dr. Sarah Chen, a molecular biologist from Johns Hopkins, Marcus Rodriguez, former Army Special Forces turned private contractor, and Jennifer Walsh, a federal agent from the DEA, undercover for 6 months investigating what she thought was a new synthetic drug operation, but she'd stumbled into something much bigger. The last entry in her encrypted reports mentioned a company called Prometheus Solutions. On paper, they developed agricultural biotechnology, harmless stuff, but their real research was funded by defense contractors and private military companies, people who saw soldiers not as human beings, but as hardware to be upgraded. I should have stopped there, filed my report, closed the case, and moved on with my life. But Jennifer Walsh had a daughter, 8 years old, living with her grandmother, because her mother had a dangerous job but aimed to make the world safer. I kept digging. Prometheus Solutions had operated for 3 years, with 7 facilities across 4 states under different names. They weren't experimenting on volunteers alone. Missing persons near their sites showed a pattern. Homeless veterans, undocumented immigrants, people society wouldn't miss. They were harvesting test subjects. I compiled everything: names, locations, financial records, victim identifications, a case that could have shut down the entire network and brought justice for dozens of people. And then I made the biggest mistake of my career. I trusted the system. I presented my findings to Harrison, expecting commendations, maybe a task force, definitely arrests. Instead, I got a new assignment: counter-terrorism in Alaska, effective immediately. Alaska in February. My work on the warehouse case had earned me a promotion to the middle of nowhere. When I tried to access the files, my clearance was revoked. Baltimore PD contacts had never heard of the warehouse, and Prometheus Solutions seemed not to exist. I spent 6 months in Alaska thinking about the case, and Jennifer Walsh's daughter, who would grow up never knowing what truly happened to her mother. About all those people who disappeared and became footnotes in some classified experiment log. When I finally came back to DC, I was a different agent. I did my job, closed my cases, kept my mouth shut. But I never forgot. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder how many other cases like this are sitting in filing cabinets marked "never existed." How many Agent Coles are being sent to Alaska right now because they asked the wrong questions? The official story is that the Baltimore warehouse was destroyed in an electrical fire. 3 transients died from smoke inhalation. Case closed. But Jennifer Walsh's daughter deserves better than that lie. And maybe some of you watching this will remember that name, Prometheus Solutions. Maybe you'll ask your own questions, because the truth doesn't disappear just because someone files it under "never existed." It just waits. If this story resonates with you, if you've heard similar names or seen similar patterns, the comments section is yours. And if you want to hear more cases that officially never happened, well, I've got 20 years worth of stories that are just waiting to be told. Subscribe if you dare. The truth is rarely comfortable,